Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you again for having me here, for having this program, this effort every year to award a journalist who's basically had to get that story no matter what. Frank graduated 70 years ago, I guess, right, from this university, about as fine a graduate as you could imagine from this school, and today it's just even doing bigger and better and greater things, and you have a lot to be proud of here, and you guys are very fortunate to be students here. So I just wanted to say that, and I want to move on to the topic, which is the thing that kind of dominated my life for the last 4 years through one, I guess, particular story. But I'm going to talk about covering college sports. And as you can see, I've subtitled this, learning, not to play ball. And I'll kind of get into, why I say that here as we move along. I don't think anybody's surprised by this. College sports it's a big business. These programs, particularly in the Big Five conferences, we're talking the SEC, ACC, Pac-12 now, Big Ten. Big 12, they're spending tens of millions of dollars each year. Ends the men's basketball tournament, close to $1 billion alone coming back to these schools. And, in the majority of the states in the country, the top paid public official is either a football coach or a basketball coach. That's pretty amazing, and it tells you just how powerful and how big these programs have gotten. I kind of stole this from Gilbert Gall, who has written a book, just came out recently, called $1 Billion Ball. It's mostly about college football, but it just talks about, it's an excellent book examining the economics of college football. And this slide here alone is pretty fascinating. Just the growth in profit over the last 13 years. It's 650%, 345%. Huge amounts of growth in these programs. Okay, but they are bringing in this money by bringing in athletes who can deliver victories, on the basketball court, on the football field. Who don't receive any pay. They are basically promised a free education, and since the NFL and the NBA will not take them until, with the NBA, you have to be out of school for at least a year. NFL, I think it's 3 years. Your path has to go through a college, whether you are interested in an education, and I'll kind of get into this. We talk about, this is what I call a recipe for corruption. Athletes who are academically challenged, uninterested in academics, are facing financial pressure to take care of their families. Universities that have invested millions in sports, millions of dollars in facilities, coaches' salaries, operations, athletic conferences, and the NCAA. They're negotiating TV deals. They're trying to bring in as much money as they can, and they have to sell a product that is going to attract a huge audience. We have governing entities that are dominated by boosters. They lack enforcement power. U.S. Department of Education doesn't get involved in these things. The accrediting commissions, they basically have a fly swatter and a howitzer and nothing in between. They'll either hit you with a sanction, which kind of has some PR damage, but it's not really a much of a weapon, or they just shut you down, and they're loath to shut you down. They really, that's a little, even in this case, that would be a heck of a thing to happen. So and then entities, like Congress. Congress is would be an entity that would have the power to do something about college sports, across the country. But they have just stayed away, and they've also voted in things that are very beneficial to college sports that I think are kind of questionable. People get a tax break, for example, for kind of buying their seat to a football stadium at some of these programs. And then we have state and federal privacy laws that keep things like grades, classes, and professors secret, FERPA. And then the last thing I talk about here is compliant media, and we'll talk about that some more. So. This dynamic presents a clear need for watchdog journalism. And it's one of the reasons why I was interested in kind of picking up the story at Carolina. It actually starts in 2010 when the NCAA came to town, found that there were football players who were taking money from agents and other perks. That's kind of the thing that happens in a lot of places. Again, we talk about athletes who a lot of times come from difficult financial backgrounds. They really aren't, their first priority is to make it to the pros. And so they are tempted by these kinds of things. So that had gone on for about a year. I was asked to kind of jump in as that was winding down. And one of the reasons why I did jump in was because I was kind of aware of this dynamic and thought that there was an opportunity here. There might be more to see, okay? And as I point out here, it won't be fun and games to try to investigate these kinds of situations. This is just some of the things that I went through while I was breaking stories about what was happening at the News and Observer. There was a website created, dirtydankane.com, basically said, I twist everything and lack ethics and so on and so forth. You couldn't tell who created this website by looking at it, but it turned out it was created by Julius Pepper's agent. When Julius Pepper's transcript became public and it showed that he was in a whole bunch of these fake classes, I don't think that it reflected well on his agent that he had done this. This was a tweet from a fan. I'd written some stories challenging a report that the university had done that basically, concluded this was not an athletic scandal. I showed that report was really full of holes, had accepted explanations from athletic officials without verifying them with other people who were who would have been able to say, yeah, that happened, or no, it didn't. I went to those people and they said, no, it didn't. And this is what I got from one of the fans. This is an email I got from somebody, roughly around the same time, intimidation, this is the attitude, the mindset that some of these fans have, regardless of the facts. Doesn't matter what facts you present, you are attacking the team, therefore you are an enemy. So you get some of that. This was interesting. Jim Romanesco, anybody familiar with Jim Romanesco? For all of you who are not, he runs the premier website for journalism news, okay, and what's going on in newsrooms around the country, and a lot of times he's writing about issues within various with reporting with various organizations, and so he kind of got scammed by UNC fans. I had written these stories showing that this one report really didn't hold water. The author of that report, a former governor, wrote a pretty angry letter about it. A Forbes writer had blogged about my story without basically acknowledging that he'd gotten his information from me. So Jim Romanesco looks at this and thinks, oh, this guy, just kind of plagiarized. But in doing so, he's reprinting what, the governor's complaints, and he's putting up there, UNC, people with, UNC ties. This Adam Lucas right here, he's an author of Tar Heel books about the Tar Heels, and here he is saying local paper laughs nervously, whistles casually, like somehow my reporting was inaccurate. Well, the real story is about a month after this, Governor Martin admitted that the information I had, that what he had said was not proven. He had to take it back. And then just recently he came out and said, yeah, it was an athletic scandal. So, but imagine, my feeling when I pop on to Romanesco's website and see that I'm being bashed when I have actually countered everything that governor has said. So, that again, I never ran into this sort of thing in any other story I'd ever covered. I mean, that includes a lot of stories that help put a House Speaker in prison, okay? It's just college sports, and it just shows, the emotion, the intensity, the fanaticism that people have about these programs, especially the University of North Carolina with its storied basketball program, 5 national championships. It's like a religion there. And again, a lot of these schools, they have these, fan news sites and fan blogs and message boards, and basically they are not interested in looking at the facts. What they try to do is take you down. And this guy here, he kind of says it pretty plainly here. He doesn't say I had a vendetta, and he really couldn't, because I've written tough stories about all kinds of things, including their rival, NC State. So, but we are UNC fans, so we must hate DK. It's the law. Again, the facts don't matter. What matters is stopping the reporting. Okay. This speaks to the concern about the oversight. Okay. Louis Bissett, he led the university systems panel that was supposed to be reviewing the investigations into this scandal. And he and that panel, like I said, when this governor came out with his report, they were ready to accept it carte blanche. They wanted to move on. Not an athletic scandal, time to move on. And just recently, we did a story about a controversial presidential search at our UNC system, and one of my colleagues, Jane Stansel, got all the email correspondence. And here's Louis Bissett and his what he says about he says the media, but he's really talking about us. We were the only ones that were breaking the stories about this. And he says, this is how they sell their product, as we have seen with the 4-year campaign to discredit the University of North Carolina. He led the panel that was supposed to be looking into this academic fraud, and that's his mindset. It's not about the facts, it's about the messenger, okay? It's one of the reasons why it did drag on for 4 years, because people were in a position of examining, investigating, on behalf of the public, had that kind of mindset. Let's see, I talked about the media. I broke a lot of stories that were based on correspondence. They were based on records. They were legitimate records. They were never disputed. They spoke to just how common these classes were, how the counselors for the athletes knew what they were using them for their most academically challenged athletes. Again, denial from the university. In the middle of 2013, again, after this governor's report, I get a hold of emails between the department chairman and his secretary, who are the architects of this scandal, and counselors within the academic support program. And here's one of them basically saying, okay, you set this one up as a research paper course. You think you do it again? All right? So she knows what this class is, and she's asking him, can you do it again? That story got no coverage locally. Well, I should say, well, little. There was I think it was a radio station, and I think maybe the college paper, wrote something about it. But, Associated Press, we have an office there. They didn't rewrite it. There was no movement on that story from the media in Raleigh. So 5 months later, I get hold of some other emails, and there's an email exchange in which one of the compliance, the assistant athletic director for compliance, is asking the NCAA's associate director for enforcement, are you guys, basically he's asking, are you guys investigating? He's basically saying, no, we're not. We're not doing anything more. So I write that story. Well, all of a sudden, the AP is right there requesting the emails on a Saturday to get it out. And they don't say anything about the other emails that showed this relationship that was going on within that academic support program and these two corrupt academic officials. And that's the only time I'm aware of where they followed up to request emails. And obviously the impression you get is that they just wanted this over. And I don't know why, but that's what happened. So when it comes to college sports, my feeling from my experience is that we're more lapdog than watchdog, okay? And regularly you see things that are happening in the media that suggest that this is not getting any better. AP and the NCAA, they launched a partnership. The AP will take, NCAA, game data from the NCAA, and they'll have these automatically automated, game stories, saving them a lot in personnel and resources, and while at the same time, providing readers with, coverage of all the various schools that are, playing sports. In some ways that's a great thing for the readers, but on the other hand, that's a relationship that could cause problems, if the NCAA and its member schools need oversight. Same question with the Tampa Bay Times. They pay the University of South Florida $30,000 a year to sponsor. They're like the official sponsor of athletic and academic events. Again, raising a question, about, how hard are you going to pursue, allegations of fraud or agents paying players, all the various things that we're seeing happening in sports programs. This next example is really it's very disheartening to me. One of the sports reporters for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune was sexually harassed by the athletic director. She did not report it. She was afraid, and she wrote a very powerful essay about this after two other university employees alleged that this athletic director had harassed them. Then she came out and said, well, happened to me too, all right? And one of the things that she said was a fear that she wouldn't be able to do the job that she had dreamed of doing, because of, this is a powerful person, powerful program, and the fear that generates, within media. Newspapers are kind of taking on the chin these days. We've lost a lot of revenue through, lost classified advertising to Craigslist. We've lost a lot of other advertising on the internet. People reading the paper for free, not buying subscriptions. We've really been hurting revenue-wise. And one of the things that I see is, newspapers they're now seeing college sports as an opportunity to raise revenue. They'll put out special sections and charge subscribers an extra. We do it. Charge them $1, put it right in their bill. They literally have to opt out if they don't want it. Instead of opting in to get it, they have to opt out if they don't want it. You've got, there are newspapers now that will produce a book for a team. That team makes that great run. Even if they don't win the championship, they're doing it, and they're just trying to find revenue. And that creates pressure on newspapers to produce that, that great copy about, those amazing sports programs, and it works against finding something wrong, okay? This last one was just recently, something that happened where the media school, I think it used to be called the journalism school, is now partnering with the athletic department, to train students in promoting, Indiana University sports. Okay, I mean, these kids are probably going to get great experience in terms of editing and production and all of that, but is that something you want your journalism school to be doing? Journalism is about finding the facts, getting to the bottom of things. So, just some examples there that trouble me, as I view the landscape. I say, why should anybody care? Here's Bob Ryan. He's a legendary sports columnist. After the UNC scandal, after this most recent report that really, kind of really showed just how entrenched and how terrible this was. Kind of had a column, and I think he was even on ESPN saying, look, that's how the sausage is made. He doesn't like it, but so be it. And what I would kind of say in response, and don't get me wrong, he's troubled by all of the corruption that's happening in college sports too. But what I would say in response is, this was something that a student wrote on Coopers. Anybody know what Coopers is? How about I think was it MyEDU or CourseRank? You know what those are, right? They're websites where you can get intelligence about professors, classes, grades. Coopers is one of those sites, and this was something that this student had written in April 24th, 2010. So this was more than a year before the paper class scandal started to emerge, and she gave a comment about the classes she was taking with Professor Nyangoro, who was the department chairman, who, again, one of the architects of these things. And she's writing, I'm taking the course by submitting a paper to Professor Nyangoro, and it's a bit daunting. It has to be in 20, 25 pages. I wish I was able to take the actual course with him. Okay, so this was a student, I hate to say it, but I'm guessing probably not an athlete, okay? But this is probably a student who stumbled into this class, had no idea what he or she was walking into, and discovers that she's not getting any instruction. There's no class, no opportunity to meet with a professor. Just come up with a paper and turn it in. Now, I don't know about you guys, but most of us, either one way or another, have to pay for our college educations, and that's a cost that's gone up quite a bit over the years. And in public universities, such as the University of North Carolina, they're subsidized. I mean, the taxpayers are helping pay for these classes. So you can look at it in any number of different ways. This particular scandal was so bad that it reached over to all students, and it cheated students besides, and the athletes got cheated too. The athletes got cheated too, whether they realized it or not, whether they knew what was going on, they got cheated too. They walked out with, substandard educations from one of the finest public universities in the country, and taxpayers at the University of North Carolina subsidized it. Is that enough for people to care about this and actually try to, maybe do something about it? I don't know, but I put it out there. And it's up to the people to decide. So, what can we do as journalists? First of all, like I said at the beginning, college sports is a business. It is a business. Maybe it's I know they're all nonprofit and everything, but huge amounts of money, growing revenues, growing profits. So we should be covering it as a business. Track the money. Background the key characters, the boosters. Pursue the academic story. Look at the clustering of majors or specific classes that athletes are taking. Are they making the honor roll, or are they graduating? Learn what the lives of athletes are truly like. You know, oftentimes it just seems like the coverage is nothing more about their fortunes on the court or on the field. The occasional story about how they got injured or had a death in the family or whatever. But I read very few stories that tell me, you know, what their academic life is like. You know, a lot of, you know, at the University of North Carolina, there are students who, I mean, they can't be an education major. Why? Because you can't student teach. You cannot play sports and student teach. Part of the scandal here is a lot of athletes were taking Swahili. Why? Because Swahili, besides the fact that there were a lot of fake classes in Swahili, Swahili did not require a lab like Spanish, you know, and some of the other typical classes, typical language programs. The lab was too much. That was too much. You know, made things difficult for their practice time. Finally, the last thing is, you know, don't be intimidated. You know, the public's counting on you to tell them what's really going on in these programs. And yes, you know, as I showed with all the, you know, attempted intimidation, it can be fairly sizable, fairly substantial. But, you know, your goal here is to tell people what's really going on, and, you know, not let, you know, your sources do it for you. So that's where I kind of wind up, and I'm ready to take questions.
Thank you, Dane. So you see Drew over there with the mic. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll run the mic to you. And that's so that we can also, we're recording this for the Reynolds School video site, so that we'll capture all the questions. Doug?
Dean Zabisky, thanks for bringing this Mr. Kane in to speak with us. Quick question about bias in reporting. How I read a lot of the media and I watch a lot of the media, and you can sense bias, whether they're for the story or against the story. How do you keep yourself away from that? How do you write stories and not get biased, not have your personal opinion in there?
Well, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to focus on the facts. And you are going to reach out to any person who might be, you know, like I said, have a shadow cast over them by those facts. And you will quote them. You will give their side of the story. And sometimes, you know, when you talk to them, you discover that their side of the story basically tells you there really isn't a story here, you know, and that has happened, you know. That happens a number of times, where when you get some information, it looks troubling, you start to look into it, but when you talk to as many people as you can, you find out that, well, you know, now this is not what this tip says or what this person tells me or what have you, and you move on. But I don't know if you've read the stories I've written, but they are built out of documents. Many of them are built out of documents. They're built out of transcripts. They're built out of records out of the academic support program. And in the end, when Ken Weinstein, who was a former Homeland Security advisor, did his investigation, he basically found that what I was reporting was on the mark, and he expanded upon it. And one of the really troubling things about Kenneth Weinstein's report is that it was loaded with email correspondence between the counselors in the academic support program and these two people in the African Studies Department. That was correspondence that I had requested from the get-go, and yet it didn't come my way. And that, you know, that is going to create a concern as a reporter, because you see that and you realize, you know, this should have been made public. The public should have had an opportunity to see this well before Kenneth Weinstein got it. And you know, I guess to answer your question, you do worry about your biases if you have them. You try to be cognizant of them, but ultimately you're building your story out of facts. You're reaching out to anybody who is connected to those facts, and when you have that reporting done, you try to produce a story that is accurate and fair.
Yes, my question is just, as you're doing this reporting and you're going through and everything is documented, how easy is it to get discouraged when everybody who you're reporting the story to runs for the nearest sandbank to place their heads there, rather than acknowledge what you're reporting? I mean, because it seems like you were reporting something that was very, very much well researched and supported by documentation, and it was a case of nobody wanted to hear it. And that seems like something that is kind of a rare thing to encounter in journalism, where you're reporting something that's shocking and people just are angry at you for even bothering to tell the truth. How do you deal with that? How do you not get discouraged?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is easy to get discouraged, and there were times where, my spirits were low, I mean, to report those emails showing, just this really corrupt relationship between those counselors and, the two academic, people, and then see months later that the NCAA, who, by the way, almost immediately requested all those emails, nonetheless then say, well, we're done here. But at the same time, that's important to know, and I wrote the story. I wanted people to know. I mean, the NCAA, despite all this, we're still, keeping their distance. And, in some ways, I think it helped move the story forward. One of the things that happened after that it really turned the story around, was the district attorney had a criminal investigation going on, coincidentally. And, he looked at what had happened, the facts that he had been presented with, which we had reported, that Professor Nanguro, the very last paper class that he taught, say taught loosely, was in the summer of 2011. Interestingly enough, this was after the NCAA had done their other investigation. They missed it. They missed the whole thing. And it was a class that was full of football players. It was created almost overnight. And he didn't teach it. And he was paid extra for it. And we reported that. And that prompted a criminal investigation. And the district attorney ultimately said, you know what, I'm going to go to the grand jury with this, and if they hit him with a fraud charge, so be it. And they did. And once that happened, really things shifted, because now you were looking at a criminal trial where the department head for this program could get on the stand, or actually his lawyer, but even better, his lawyer could just say, I'm going to call this person to the stand, I'm going to call this person to the stand, I'm going to call this person to the stand. What did you know? It was going to be a disaster for the university, or at least it had the potential for that. As one person got up there after another, testified, emails pulled out, well, what's this about? And so, one of the things that happened was, at the I think the university and the university system realized they needed to do an investigation that people would actually believe. And that's when they brought in, Kenneth Weinstein. And they were able to persuade the district attorney that, if we get a credible investigation going, and we get the cooperation of, Dr. Nanguro and Debbie Crowder, who, was his department manager, will you drop the charges? And he saw that in effect was happening, and he did drop the charge, but we ended up with a report that was, much more detailed and much more telling about, what had happened, so the story continued, and I kept working the story, and right now we're trying to figure out what the NCAA is going to do. They came back,
All right, you mentioned that there was threats and intimidation. What I would like to know is what magnitude was it? Did you have to, call the police Did you pack heat? Did you have to draw on the will?
I'll tell you right now, I would never pack heat. I have no idea how to shoot a gun. Even though I grew up on a farm with a shotgun and a .22 caliber rifle, I don't know how to shoot a gun. There were a couple of times where we notified the police. I never felt like, I never really felt like I was in any real danger, but, it was good to just have it documented in case something did happen. Because if something did happen, then they would know, we need to reach out to these people and say, well, where were you when this happened, at this time, and all of that, So, we did do that, but, it didn't, it didn't stop me from doing what following the story. I never felt like, oh gosh, if I write another story, I'm gonna get more of this. I've kind of figured, well, I'll probably get more of it. But this story was very important. We really needed to get to the bottom of it.
I'm a strategic communications student, and I'm just kind of curious, from your perspective as a seasoned journalist who has dealt with kind of very controversial stories involving large entities, what do you think is sort of the biggest issue or point of disconnect between the relationship on the journalist side with the public relations professionals?
That's an interesting question. I have dealt with public relations people who've done an excellent job, okay? They've given me what I've asked. They have helped me set up interviews with people that I need to talk to, people who have the direct knowledge. And I've also dealt with public relations people who give me all kinds of reasons why I can't have something, constantly tell me that the people I need to talk to aren't available. And, and as a result, I think, the story suffers. We have, sometimes, there are a number of these stories where, we had an awful lot of facts about a problem, and we gave the university every opportunity to speak about it. And they just, they give us a pat emailed statement, and that was it, And, I wish I had a better idea why, some of the communications people, do this. I think, and sometimes it's because their bosses tell them, I just don't want to. I don't want to talk. I don't want to be a part of this. And then you have to ask yourself why. Is it because there are things that they know that they don't want to get out, and the safest way is to just, put up the roadblock, and come up with cite a privacy law. You can't have that. FERPA, I would advise anybody who is going to be in the, the public relations, communications side of things, really, if you do your level best to help reporters get the information they need, the reporters will, they will respect you, and they will tell other reporters, that's a good person to deal with. That person, realizes that he or she works for the public. These are public institutions. And that the goal is to tell the public what's happening, within their institutions. I don't know if that answered your question. And the other thing I'll say is that some communications and public relations people, they will realize this. They will realize the dynamic, and they will go back to their bosses and tell them, look, you've really got to explain here. I know cases like that where they have done that, and I think everybody benefited as a result. Maybe not somebody who did something wrong, but generally, public, benefits as a result.
Hi. Okay. So after all this, after kind of this whole ordeal, could you still be, and are you still a college football fan?
That's a good question. I used to be a big college sports fan. And I lived in a great area. I wasn't wedded to any of the teams down there, but where I live is like the cradle of college, particularly basketball, college sports. I mean, NC State, Duke's the national champion this year. UNC, all have won national championships. It's a vibrant, rivalry. It's great basketball. Football, they're okay. But I will tell you, this experience and what I've learned about college sports is, it's soured me. I watch now almost more with kind of like an anthropologist side than I do, or a sociologist side than I do as a fan, and I'm looking at just all of the showmanship and entertainment, that comes along with these things, and I realize that these broadcasts are, there's so much money and talent and effort, just giving these things a tremendous sheen, but very little discussion about, do we even hear what majors the athletes are anymore? That used to be something that they would do. I think that's gone. One of the things I did recently, the last couple of months, is NC State and Alabama stopped reporting the majors that their athletes were in. Everybody else was doing it, but they had pulled it out of their media guides. There was a national reporter who was looking at clustering among majors, and they were told by those two schools that, that's not public. Well, it is public. And I went to them and I said, show me the law that says it's not public. And when I did that, they said, we made a mistake. Here it is. So they gave it to me, and I put it out there. I don't kind of know where I'm going, except that, that does, from a personal standpoint, it does make it hard to watch and root and get excited, about what you're seeing, on the screen. I've focused a lot more energy on baseball, Major League Baseball, quite honestly, in recent years. So,
To answer your question, we do post our majors here for the football players. Our
Good.
newspaper does that every year. My question had to do with FERPA. I look at it and it's a fiduciary mess. I don't know, want to know how you got around that, how you can battle the school through that and get that kind of data.
That's a great question. And first of all, we'll say that this scandal, it really did rely on a couple of kind of one in a million things, all right? Number one, I was backgrounding these football players that were in trouble earlier because they were getting money from agents and stuff like that. And I happened to find a transcript for one of them. As you guys know, FERPA, there's no way you'll get a transcript from a university, knowingly get a transcript from a university because of FERPA. Unless a student tells the university, hey, give it to them, Of course, we'll probably ask you to just give it to us. But anyhow, we'll never get that. We will never get that from a university. But here it was in this, elsewhere. And it was kind of lucky that happened. And then there was another transcript that emerged, and it was kind of alluded to this before, Julius Peppers. And this was the strangest thing. The university was testing, 15 years ago, was testing kind of a search engine where if you input your classes and your grades, it will take that information and then spit back at you what other classes you needed to graduate. So it was a tool basically to help you graduate on time. And as you know, public universities subsidized. It's if you're sticking around for a fifth and sixth year, taxpayers are paying extra, so they want to get you out on time. So this would tell you what classes you needed. Well, so they were testing that with test transcripts, and I found one of them just searching around on the university's website. For some reason, it was up there in a public place, And I looked at it, and it had a fake name, it had a fake address, but it looked so much like an athlete's transcript. And the only classes this athlete was doing well in were the same classes that were determined to be these paper classes. And I went to the university and I said, you know, this looks like a real transcript. Can you please confirm that? And they wouldn't do it. Let's get to the question you asked. And I said, you know, and they kept saying, no, this is not a real transcript. This is a mock transcript. We just created this to test this program. And I said, well, could you just check your grade rolls? Check your grade rolls and see whether or not, you know, grades are matching up. You know, and it would not have been that difficult to do. And they wouldn't do it. And finally, I just said, look, you know, if you don't think you're going to have to do it now, you're going to have to when I write about it. Because I was really convinced that there was something to this transcript. And they just refused. They would not do it. So I wrote about it. And, you know, the rival NC State fans, where they have an excellent information technology school, they figured out from that web address, most web addresses have a kind of a hub address within them. They got to the hub address. When you get to the hub address and click on that, you get all the links that shoot off of that hub address. They started clicking through those, and up pops Julius Pepper's transcript. Again, it's just like kind of a one in a million thing, but it showed, you know, it showed that this thing had gone a lot farther back, and that these things were being used heavily, and prompted another investigation, the second investigation, which again tried to, you know, say this wasn't an athletic scandal, but nonetheless it just ramped up the attention to this thing. And then finally the third transcript was Rashad McCants, and he was a star basketball player in the 2005 championship team. And this is an example that, you know, a lot of times when you keep pursuing a story and writing about it, you know, as each development emerges, a lot of times that persuades people, you know, to step up. And Rashad did. He came forward. Unfortunately, he didn't talk to me. He talked to ESPN, but he showed them his transcript. That 2005 championship season, that's all he took were these, you know, bogus classes. And he knew it. And he said it was a joke. It's a lot of things that, you know, the UNC faithful and the university, you know, really tried to, you know, contradict. But his transcript is what it was, you know, which was loaded with these things. And when, you know, Ken Weinstein came out with his report, it turned out a lot of the members on that team were in these classes, taking 1, 2, 3 of them, you know, not to the extent of Rashad, but they were loaded up in these things. And one of the big questions everybody has now when this investigation finishes is, you know, will the NCAA go after that championship? But in terms of, you're not going to be able to go to the university and say, you know, give me all these athletes' transcripts. Okay, that's not going to happen. But there are things you can do. You can go and ask for, a lot of universities will track classes where athlete enrollment is upwards of 20, 25%, and you can look at those. You can look at the clustering of majors. You know, you can look to see how many athletes are making the honor roll or how many are graduating. You can go try to talk to, you know, athletes who have left the university and ask, you know, can I see your transcript? There are ways to get at it. It's not easy, but there are ways to get at it. And sometimes if you come across something that is particularly telling, it does put the university in a position of having to, you know, do something like, you know, producing, you know, the classes and the grades, you know, without the names of the athletes, but to give you an idea, you know, that helps determine whether or not there was something, you know, bad in the milk, I guess. So, does that help?
One more question.
Mine is kind of two-parted, and which is, the first part is, I understand what you're saying about special sections. I'm just curious if, what about special sections for, say, the Pope visiting?
For the what?
For the Pope visiting the United States.
Uh-huh.
I'm from Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia Daily News had a special section you could buy books. It was a special section that was produced. How do those differ? And the second question I have is, did race and ethnicity play any portion, in your opinion, to the coverage that you were providing?
Well, I don't know what Philadelphia did with their special section on the Pope visit. I mean, if they charged their readers for it, that's sort of like the first hurdle I think that has to be cleared to really, kind of ask the question of are they going to look at the Pope and his visit and the Catholic Church in a clear light, or are they just looking to kind of pander to Catholics out there with a special section that they're going to want to buy as a keepsake? So I don't really know. Okay. So as far as your other question, I mean there was a concern that because this was the African and Afro-American Studies Department, that this was sort of a hands-off department. That if you raise questions, you might get accused of, I don't know, some sort of, racial bias or whatever. It never really emerged in much of the correspondence. Matter of fact, I'm not sure I can think of an example where it emerged in the correspondence. But, I've heard it. It's one of those things that sort of gets talked about, but nothing really specifically, just like, like a direct piece of evidence that just says, yeah, we just looked the other way because we didn't want to invite, being hit with the R word or something. It was it was an interesting department. It didn't have a master's degree, if I remember right. And as a result, it wasn't getting the scrutiny that a lot of other departments would get, particularly the chairman. The departments that had master's degree programs for some, and I don't know, I'm not sure I'll remember the explanation for this, but they were subject to more serious review. But there were a lot of things that just the university wasn't really tracking very well. One of them was independent studies. Just they weren't really tracking. They didn't really have really good standards about what kind of GPA you had to have. Whether you needed to be a advanced student versus a beginning student. Some of the good things that they've changed.
Very good. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And thanks,
Great
thanks
questions.
everyone for